Silo, episode 4 of season 3 is in the books, and we have a lot of things to talk about today. If you do not want to be spoiled, please click off the video. Bernard is alive and well, not well, but he is alive at the bottom of the silo basement, just like I called. If you've been sticking along with my review since episode 1, I said I think there's a chance Bernard is still alive. Even though they showed us his death on screen, I thought that there was a chance for good old Bernard, and there he is in the basement. It looks like Robert Sims has joined forces, at least mentally, with Juliet. I'm not sure if she's going to be willing to accept him at any point in time, but it seems like Robert Sims is making moves in order to be on her side. So we'll get into all that throughout the episode. So I thought this was a pretty good episode. I apologize for my reviews in the past. I didn't realize that these episodes came out on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. I thought it was Friday mornings at 3 a.m. Therefore, I had to wake up, go to work, come back, review them, and then they were out the next couple days. So hopefully, if Silo keeps it up, we'll be posting early on Thursday nights with the short recap on YouTube Shorts and TikTok, and then we'll go with the long length review, which you're watching now, which will be up on YouTube the next morning. So let's start off this episode. If you were listening last week, I said somebody's going to save and then jump in Juliet. It's obvious, this is her story. She's not going to die just on a one off like Camille killing her in episode 4 of season 3. I figured somebody would be there to help. Although I was not expecting the nurse to be the one to help her. So the nurse injects, you had the judicial second in command, I believe her name starts with an A or something, Alderson or something like that. And yeah, this got crazy real fast where the nurse is like, holy shit, they're coming in to kill her. We got to figure this out. Well, she doesn't say we because it's just her. Juliet's chained to the bed. They figure it out. They get her out of there. So that was surprising to see the nurse who had been investigating Juliet's apartment for the pills that she had been spitting out. So that was kind of a weird, oh, she spit out the pills, but she was actually like trying to help this whole time because it seemed like the nurse, at least from what the show is showing us, the nurse was very like, take your pills, be a good girl. But as the nurse reveals later on, that she was actually taking away some of the pills, some of the memory loss pills. So she's actually Team Juliet all along, or AKA Team Robert Sims. I guess there's kind of these different. We'll have to break it down maybe of these different groups now that are running around in the silo. Seems like she's working for Robert Sims in order to kind of what's the word? Like stabilize the powers of Camilla and the stupid AI voice, which I've been rapidly against. So I was happy to see the nurse obviously jump in here. Close battle between the nurse and the second in command of the judicial, but when you get stabbed in the neck with a sleeping agent, you're going to be out of it. So that was nice to see there. Juliet's saved. They're on the run to start off the episode. Another character I have not been in love with this season was Shirley. We had this sort of 3 episode arc now that it's over, thank God, of her being like mad at Juliet for something she had absolutely no control over. Last episode, she's like, "How you can't like remember me at all," and like pissed at her for that. If she, you have to feel sympathetic for these characters who have lost their memories. How can you? It's frustrating. I get it to be frustrated. Like, why do you remember what you remember? But there's nothing she can do about it. So Shirley says to Knox, I was a piece of shit to Juliet. Finally, Shirley's starting to preach. Shirley is very hot and cold for me, but this episode I like Shirley a lot. And I agree with her sentiment. You were being annoying. You were being a piece of shit to Juliet. Like, just grow up and figure it out. And Juliet was asking the right questions. You just ignored her. She found fucking Lucas Kyle and Mines in one episode. So it's good to see Shirley back on the same page as Juliet here, and they'll get into some adventures later on in this episode. I have to say, bro, the DC stuff has been interesting. The Juliet stuff is really picking up rapidly. The stuff in the silo is really interesting. This Orla Kent storyline, it must be leading to somewhere like super important because they keep forcing this in there, and it's definitely the third of 3 storylines going on right now of like interesting stuff. Where you have, the Juliet stuff is probably the most interesting just because it's the characters we've been with for a while. Then you have like the side plot of DC, how we got to the silo, which they're doing a very good job of mixing in both of those storylines. Like I haven't been complaining at all about those 2 storylines. The Orla Kent storyline, like it's a character we just met. She's dead. Like it's a mysterious death. If this was like a pilot episode and we're like, holy shit, Orla Kent's dead. I just watched Reacher season 1 where it's like, holy shit, this person's dead. Then it'd be more interesting. But like Orla Kent, we don't know her at all. All we know is she's like the shadow to the head of supply. So we get the autopsy on her. She did not die in the mines, and she was struck in the back with rebar, and she was meant to not be found. So I don't really know like what we're supposed to take from that. We saw the grumpy head of the some group talking to her at the first council. But the Silo is in such disarray right now that I don't see like there being a council meeting or like there being an important reason to kill Orla Kent. I'm kind of hoping they are able to just wrap up the storyline quickly, and our sheriff can come back and help us figure out some of the stuff going on with the Silo, because I like the way his story was going prior to this sort of side task that's, kind of just taking up time in the episode. In my opinion, it's not really my favorite storyline. Hopefully it leads to somewhere important, because yeah. Anyways, like I mentioned, the aforementioned DC storyline. So Daniel and Helen, we saw last episode, they were at this man Steve's place. He's kind of like this like dark web, enthusiast, like has all the tech and stuff. His place was trashed, and they realize they are now dealing with a huge conspiracy because Helen has pulled like 17 pages to out his phone number, and his phone number is not in use anymore. That, along with the person who had passed away in the operation that Charlotte was doing, the lead pilot's father, who we saw at the memorial last week, his phone number is now off the radar too, which I'll definitely need to talk about that in a couple of minutes when we get to the further in the storyline. But they realized now they're dealing with like a big conspiracy theory. This is a classic thing that takes place in these types of shows. Some sort of big conspiracy theory in the government, in the secret in the agencies. We'll get into more of that, but they realize they got a big problem on their hands, and yeah, I think they do. But they've been, I don't know. I feel like after this episode, they have some positive developments that we'll have to talk about. So another dynamic that I was excited to explore after last week with Lucas Kyle being back in the show is seeing him talk to Kennedy, Danny, and that crew, and sort of figure out the dynamic going on there, where it's not off to a great start, unfortunately, which kind of makes sense because I forgot Kennedy's kind of just a dickhead in terms of most things. Like, he has his set of beliefs. He doesn't really budge in them at all. Lucas tells him that the outside is not actually a paradise like they meant it, or they thought that it was. And Kennedy's like, I don't believe him. Luckily enough for Lucas, he has supporters in the room. The sheriff helper, I'm going to need to learn her name because I keep talking about her every week. The person who was helping out Nichols as a sheriff's like assistant in the last couple of seasons, she's there and she believes Lucas Kyle. And then you have the real sheriff now's wife, who's been like part of this like anti whatever resistance for Juliet. So yeah, I'm hoping Kennedy can just get his head on straight and stop being so annoying about like being super rigid about everything. And I hope, honestly, I wouldn't mind if he tries to go outside and just dies instantly. Like, I feel like that would be a cool thing to happen. Like, oh, you thought outside was a paradise, huh? Go out there, and eat shit, bitch, because you're being a fucking annoying. And I like Kennedy's, like, what he does for the show. It's just like in this talking to Lucas Kyle, a guy who literally knows everything about the fucking Silo. He can't say that. But like, Lucas is probably in the top 5 at least of people in the Silo right now who knows as much as he knows. So that's that. He also mentions that the cleaning video that they found, the big video that caused the big ruckus in season 1 that Juliet had found, that was just played in the helmet so that people actually clean when they go outside. I don't think I knew that, so that's an interesting little factoid. I feel like I did not know that, or it's been too long for me watching Silo to remember that was a fact. But that's cool that they show that video to make it look like there is something that needs to be cleaned. Back with Shirley, she now has realized, I was being a piece of shit. I got to go talk to my good friend Juliet, and she's with Knox. And I respect Knox here, where he goes one-man army, where they need fucking like 10 judicial guards to take him down, so Shirley can get in to see Juliet in the medical center. Back in where is Juliet? She's on the run with the nurses. Judicial is chasing them down. The classic, everyone just hides in a freaking closet and somehow never gets found. But she's hiding with the nurse, and the nurse tells her, go to pump room on 76 and I'll meet you there. And then she causes a distraction herself, gets the digital off her so Juliet can slink away. Who is waiting for her in pump room 76? Robert. So this is the interesting part, right? Where Robert is now in this pump room waiting for her. So it's assumed by me and probably others that have watched this episode that Robert sent the nurse to Juliet to like kind of connect that, and he's actively working against Camilla's interest right now, which is with the AI voice telling her to kill Juliet. Obviously, if the nurse saved Juliet, that's against what Camilla's wishes were. And Robert mentions a lot in this episode of like, the voice told you to do that. He's like, I'm willing to help you no matter what. Like, he might just be faking that shit, because last episode he was kind of like, let's be a family, and Camilla's not really having any of that. So this is interesting to see this, like almost the one like true marriage and like romantic relationship we have that's like active in the show right now between these two who are they were there for each other. They were their rocks. I mean, you have the sheriff and his wife, but they're kind of on the rocks right now. Anyways, it's weird to see these two like be working in different directions where there's just so many narratives going on in the silo of like who's trying to appease to who. Sims is running his own little side quest. Camille's listening to the AI voice. Juliet's trying to figure out what's happening. Then you have like Shirley and Knox like deep down working on the construction now, kind of happy with how things have gone, but probably are questioning more. Same thing with like Walker. And then you have like Kennedy running his little side crew. So it's really interesting to see all these kind of dynamics at play where imagine being, as they say in Game of Thrones or in House of the Dragon, imagine being the small folk in the silo right now. Like, whose alliance are you with right now? But yeah, all these crazy dynamics. But Juliet runs immediately when she sees Robert, which, yeah, there is some bad history there, but she doesn't remember really about Robert. So she doesn't remember. I don't know what she remembers and what she doesn't remember. So I don't know what really happened here, but she saw Robert. Obviously, that's probably someone you're going to be concerned about because he was running all the security in season one. He is the judicial judge, head judge, or whatever. So it's probably scary to see him in a position of power where like you remember being chased from him and being sketched out by him. So I am curious to see, will Juliet like accept a meeting with Robert somehow, or is there some way he can get through to her to prove to her that he's like on her side? I feel like that's going to be a dynamic that plays out in the next couple episodes of trying to figure out how they can get on the same page, and if they can even get on the same page at all. If Juliet will ever really trust Robert, and I wouldn't blame her if she doesn't end up trusting him. But I'm curious to see what Robert's got cooking, what he's trying to do here. None of this matters, by the way, because Robert's in the pump room. It's kind of like one of those scenarios of like Darth Vader showing up in like the hut of like, I'm deep pulling right now, but in the hut of Luke where it's like he's right across the room, but you can just run away, and Juliet just runs away. Luckily, Shirley had been trailing Robert, catching the conversation between Robert and Camille, which obviously isn't going to help that dynamic either because Robert's pretending to be on board with what Camille wants. So Shirley's going to report that back to Juliet and vice versa, whatever. So Shirley's there to save the day in our eyes. And I think something later that happens in the episode will definitely help alleviate Robert's intentions, at least if you still think he's got bad things going on. Anyways, Shirley's there to save Juliet, and they're headed for the void in the basement, which is an interesting proposition and actually sketches out Lucas Kyle because Lucas Kyle, remember, has a different. I don't know if his AI that he talked to is the same AI that Camille is talking to. I imagine it is, where he's like, the AI is like, if you tell anyone about this, you're gonna be fucked, whatever. We all remember where we were for that scene. So tons of stuff going on right now in the silo. It's hard to really put a grasp to it all. But we have to spend more time in DC, which I'm not mad. I do like this DC storyline. So we've seen this scary man. Remember, Charlotte in episode 1 was on the train, did not want to see him when he was outside of the train, was kind of sneaking away from him. He was there at the memorial for the pilot last episode, and also when Helen got fired. So this man clearly has some pull. He's kind of like a Paul Kellerman. If you've watched Prison Break, like he's kind of just there to be like the piece of shit, like head of the agency. So this guy actually talks and actually is willing to go, well, is going to go up to Daniel and Helen and asks them to coffee, which, I feel like if I mean, I haven't read the Silo books, but like I'm assuming Daniel and Helen have to make it out of, like, I wasn't assuming they were going to die, but they're kind of put into like a bad spot of like having to accept coffee with this guy. I don't know who this guy is. He doesn't even offer a name to them, but he does offer them security and different sort of ways to make this go away. So we find out, according to him, that Steve, the person, the black or dark web person, had taken a job with a cybersecurity firm, something that he was, I guess, looking forward to in his life. And then the pilot's dad got a generous loan for his brother's business. Now, I do find it interesting that neither of those people's phones are in use. So he could just be saying that, and then, eventually that's like, so I'm a little worried about this dynamic playing out, especially for the last piece of information we get in this storyline for now. But I feel like, this scary man is not to be trusted, and I'm calling him Scary Man until we ever get his name revealed. But I don't like what this guy's direction is. He feels like that kind of shill for the evil corporation. Anyways, what he offers Helen is a job at the Times. So she has some journalistic fraud, which I guess has been sort of side referenced throughout the season. I'm curious if we'll ever get like the full true story behind what really happened there. I know Daniel looked it up and it said a fictitious source was involved in that. So curious to see how that ends up with Helen. Well, they're all going to be probably, I assume that Helen and Daniel will also be heading to the silos to start the silos because, we see the Pez dispenser in the silo. So I'm curious, like, where do they go from here, and how does it get so fucked up. Like, are we going to get to that point by episode 10, or are we going to spend some time in season 4, which will be the last season, with Daniel and Helen as well? So I'm curious to see how they kind of either wrap that up or continue that on in season 4. I feel like it would be smart to just wrap that up because you probably will have a shit ton of stuff to go over in season 4, but I don't know what's coming, so I don't know. I don't really know how to pace this out. Anyways, that's the job for Helen, is the job with the Times, something she'd always dreamed about. So this guy actually does know it's good for them, or good for them to want to accept this, because he offers Daniel nothing. He offers to take away Charlotte's health care and kind of get her fucked up. She's expensive right now with her trying to recall her memory and live in this like very upscale like recovery home. And he's like, that's expensive. We can take that away. So seemingly these two part ways where, this was too good to be true, obviously. And, I'm not usually one for love. I don't usually need love in these stories, but I feel like there's a connection here, right? Like it's going to happen. And let's just get it out of the way right now. Let's see them kiss and, let's have fun. We're living in pretty silo worlds. I'm down for them, whenever you guys want to admit it. And I don't know what it's going to take. But I feel like Daniel and Helen are definitely going to hook up, but they leave right now. They separate ways. It looks like surprisingly, Helen's the one who's like very dug into this. I know Daniel has a family connection, but Helen's the one who's been like super investigating this, basically put her life on hold to like figure out what's going on here. She's actually the one to be like, yeah, of course I'm taking the job at the fucking Times, but she also realizes the threat, where I think Daniel as like a congressman doesn't really realize what could possibly happen to them. He thinks he's like too untouchable, which when you're dealing with agencies and conspiracies like this, no one's too untouchable. So both of them I think were in the right, but they eventually part ways. They had also talked to one of Daniel's friends in DC, a man named Sam, who initially had denied them what they wanted to look into. So we'll have to see if that goes anywhere in the next couple scenes. Yeah, he does find something. So we'll talk about that in a second. Basically, the rest of the episode, we wrap up with three major plot points for the three different storylines. So starting, of course, with the least interesting storyline of Orla Kent. More developments taking place. The sheriff talks to the boyfriend of Orla. Didn't give me killer vibes. He kind of just gave me like laid back, chill. He was very like nonchalant, like, yeah, I'm not worried about her. She'll turn up. Like she's so crazy. She goes all over the place. Like I don't feel like he's suspicious. He has a dog too. I wouldn't be sus on him, and I wouldn't be sus on the person who is like the new Shadow, where she's like, oh fuck, I gotta run this shit. I'm the daughter of the person who was being a dickhead in the mines, whatever. Um, so I'm not suspicious of either of those two, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of them was like faking it until you make it. Where now, I guess that other woman, McLean, has gone missing. Walker's lover, and we haven't seen a lot of Walker either, so maybe they're off doing something. But I don't really know what's going on with Orla Kent. Like I'm saying, just wrap this up, but I feel like this is going to take way too long to figure out. But whatever, I'll complain about it every week as we go. In DC, Daniel gets a phone call from Sam. So Sam had been bothered by what Daniel said to him, where this very much felt like either, well, I have two predictions for how this is going to go, and hopefully neither of them are right. There's been a lot of shots of in DC of Daniel and Helen talking, people looking at them from afar. So it's obviously we're meant to believe that they're being followed and being investigated and being tracked. So I'm a little worried that either this guy's going to be dead right when they go to talk to him, but I feel like they wouldn't leave it on a cliffhanger like that if he was just going to be dead, like they would have just showed it at the end of the episode. And that's like that just happened basically with the Steve guy. They went back to go talk to him and there was nothing there. So I feel like Sam will give them something important and maybe he'll end up dead. Or the other thing is like he'll be like, "Yo, I got something for you, man. Come over." And he's like got a gun pointed at them, which would be super interesting. I feel like maybe they could go that route. And then there's also just this timeline where like Sam ends up helping them out and being like their inside source in DC. I don't know where I think it's going. I think he's gonna at least give them some important piece of information, unless he's like going antagonist on them, which I don't foresee. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. He found something, so I'm curious what he found and how this is going to really evolve into them getting into the silos. Like I feel like we're not even fucking close to that right now. Not really at all. And I guess I don't know what will cause that event. Maybe this is a 2-season thing. I don't know. But the big moment of the episode that everyone will be talking about, that I called, okay, on my LeBron James shit, I actually did call this though. In episode 1, I said, I don't know if Bernard's dead. Now, they did show us the two different variations of Sims killing him, where one of them I think he burned him and one of them he choked him out. Sims saved Bernard. Bernard's in the void. Juliet opens up this little like protected area, and there's Bernard on the couch saying, "Hello, Juliet." So that was awesome to see him back. It's no death is like it never made sense in the first place. It just on the fire. If Juliet lived, how did Bernard not live? And Bernard is actually a crazy character to reintroduce because what's his story? I think he's actually going to be able to help Juliet a lot, like redevelop her memory. Because if you remember at the end of season 2, he was just straight grumping around, like he had no right to live, pushed Juliet out of the silo, or tried to keep her from coming in, had a gun to her saying, you're gonna end it all. And we never really found out what specifically Lucas Kyle said to Bernard. Probably the thing about the AI that Safeguard could just fuck them up if they wanted to. But Bernard is alive. So big reveal there at the end of episode 4. I think he's going to be able to help Juliet regain her memory, and they're going to figure some shit out. And this is going to get really crazy as we head towards the midpoint of season 4. So yeah, another great episode out of Silo. Like I said, please skip the Orla Kent storyline, but I guess that's just something we're meant to be caring about. So hopefully it leads to something big. At this point, I do like the sheriff character, but I feel like this is taking up too much time for something that I just don't care that much about. So my favorite character of this episode is Robert Sims because he's able to turn the tables on Camille without her knowing, and he's also helping out Juliet, and he also kept Bernard alive. So it's good to see him have a pulse of his own, have his own skin in the game, have his own thing going on. So I like to see that out of Sims. Least favorite I gave to Kennedy. I've given every single least favorite to Camille so far, but she wasn't actually that terrible in this episode. No AI, maybe because there was no AI voice chats between her and the voice. But I didn't really like Kennedy in this episode being like, oh, I know everything. Like, bro, Lucas Kyle literally knows fucking everything. Like, I guess you can't really know that if you're Kennedy. But I didn't like the way he was acting. And there's not a ton of people to give least favorite to in this episode. So I'm going with Kennedy on that one. So that's where we'll leave off Silo episode 4. Can't wait for episode 5 and the rest of the season. If you're new here, I cover so many things. Okay, we got House of the Dragon weekly, we got Silo weekly. There's a couple other shows coming out that I'm still debating on what I'm going to do with those. Movie reviews, I reviewed The Odyssey on Monday or Tuesday, one of those days. Check it out in both full and short form. So if you've seen that, go check that out. And then we got other movie reviews coming out. Older movies will feature Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Drive, and Blue Velvet. And then I'm going to see Spider-Man, maybe some other newer movies in theaters. Those always will take precedent and be posted first, but older reviews will always be on the burner, ready to come out whenever there is time. And sports, we have UFC 330 coming up in August. I cover all the numbered events for that. And then we also do a weekly NFL stream. There might be some format changes coming, but we'll have to talk about that when we get to it. We'll do at least a weekly stream for the NFL season. So much stuff happening here in the Dubcast. Would love it if you subscribe, like, comment, dislike, do what you got to do to the video. Would love to actually talk to people. I love talking to people about the episodes in the comments. So let me know down below what you thought of this episode and where you think, on Bernard being alive. What do you think of some of my theories that I threw out there in this episode? Let me know. I would love to have a dialogue in the comments. So I'll leave you all with that. And as always, be easy, y'all.